Are you a business owner stuck in fear, doubt, and worry about what the marketplace will look like in the future? Then this show is for you. Strap on your seatbelt and get ready to disrupt and innovate. Here's your host, Lisa Levy.
Welcome to Disrupt and Innovate. Today, I have a truly inspiring guest whose work is redefining how we think about happiness and success. Matt O'Neill is a happiness expert who has positively impacted the lives of more than 100,000 people worldwide through his teaching, writing, and speaking. He's the author of the groundbreaking book, Good Mood Revolution, and the popular podcast by the same name. Matt's message is simple yet profound. Happiness is a choice, even when life gets tough. And it's not just a theory. Matt walks the walk every single day as a father of 4 young children, a successful entrepreneur who's leading 2 thriving businesses with over 80 employees and $8 million in revenue. Matt understands firsthand how chaotic life can get. And it is my great pleasure to welcome Matt to the show today.
Lisa, what's up?
Hello, how are you? I'm so excited to have this conversation with you today.
I am so freaking thrilled to have this conversation today. I love talking about how to be happy and successful at the same time.
You know, I can't honestly think of anything that's more fun to actually do for like your living, to focus on happiness all day, every day.
Right. You know, there's a bunch of side benefits to focusing on happiness, which is I get to feel freaking amazing a lot. And when I don't, right, when I fall out of happiness, that's even fun too, because I'm like, oh, here's an opportunity. It's a challenge for me today. Like, can I practice what I preach? And, you know, and that's kind of nice. And then also it helps me continue to redevelop and come up with new ways to help people get back into states of joy and peace and love and all the emotions we really enjoy feeling.
Absolutely. So we've already given lots of hints about what you do, but will you tell the audience a little bit about how you came to this place and why it's so important right now?
I was born with this mission to make the world a happier place. And, you know, when I was a kid, I would get these little glimpses that, hey, you know, you're going to teach the world about feeling better. And then when I was a teenager and I had all that teen angst and I wasn't a super happy guy, I would get the same kind of like mental nudges. And then they showed up again in my 20s. And then finally, when I was in my late 30s, I was just journaling. I'm like, what am I supposed to do to make the biggest impact in the world? And I finally just got like this very clear answer, which is write that freaking book already and teach people how to feel happy while they're going after success and doing all the other things that we do, because we're very busy. Everyone's so busy. Our lives are so full. How about this? You said, how about this time? The world has been in turmoil for all time. Right now it's in turmoil. Like read the Bible. It was in turmoil back then, right? I went and saw the play Hamilton. It's about our founding fathers. They were shooting each other. They would get in a disagreement. We think politics is bad now, right? They'd be like, I challenge you to a duel. They would kill each other in the street, right? And so the world has always been in turmoil, and it's not other humans. And I was just talking with somebody about this morning. He's like, I'm gonna move out of the United States. I'm going to go to St. Lucia, and I'm like, you know, it's not a United States thing. This is a human consciousness thing, and so you're going to find the same human consciousness issues that you don't agree with right now here in the United States everywhere in the world. Now, I know there's different. You know, I travel around the world, and you see different people acting in different ways, and some places have some really beautiful cultures but it's still human consciousness, and that's what we're dealing with. And it's I love it. You know, be the change you want to see in the world. Yeah. Well, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. It's a Wayne Dyer quote. And the United States becomes a way more beautiful place to be when your mind is a more beautiful place to be. So wherever you are, you are. And I just teach people how to be where you are as happy as you possibly can. And there's very concrete, easy steps to follow to get there. And a lot of times people just say, well, isn't that just kind of ignoring problems? And isn't this just putting on a fake smile? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Happiness is a skill, and it's a skill that we can learn and get better at. And I just teach people how to do it.
That's fabulous. And I'm a big believer, right, in the things that we can learn, skills and capabilities. For me, my example is always the fact that I am naturally very introverted. Having these kinds of conversations, standing on a stage, speaking in front of an audience, right? Those are skills and a capability that I learned to step out of my natural self into something else. In the book, Good Mood Revolution, you set the book up in two parts. And you talk about part one, right? The 8 primary bad moods, and then you contrast it with the good moods. Can you talk a little bit about the foundation and the, I guess, the juxtaposition that we have to start with to understand where we're going on this journey?
Yes. And this is why I don't just teach putting on a fake smile and saying affirmations that everything is perfect when it's not. The first half of the book is conquering the bad moods. And conquering is something that business owners and entrepreneurs can really, sink their teeth into, because we love to conquer problems and take on new challenges. Well, we've got challenges. The challenge is we've got these 8 primary bad moods. They are shame, guilt, hopelessness, sadness, fear, lust, anger, and pride. And they all show up with different variations and different names, but it always is going to file into those 8 categories. And we can't ignore them. So if we just push our anger down inside, a lot of times entrepreneurs, anger is a primary emotion. We just push that anger down and pretend like it's not there. It rears its head, and it might show up as an explosion of anger on somebody that didn't need it over something small, or it could show up in terms of pain in the body. It could show up in self-sabotage. And so these emotions don't just go away if we ignore them. So the first half of the book, and this is really our journey, is to get very clear about, when am I losing myself from happiness? When am I falling from grace? When am I falling out of joy? And if we can get really clear when we fall out, now we just need to learn, okay, I fell out, and it's one of these 8 things. Which of the 8 is it? And then Matt taught me that each 8 has a signature thought pattern and feeling, and it's not me. I've just now put on my shame glasses. And when I have my shame glasses on, I feel like I'm not good enough. Okay, well, that's not true. It's not true that you're not good enough, but we start to see the world through that when we have that emotion directing us. And now there's a way out of it, about how to take those glasses off and see the world as it is again.
Absolutely. And I love the analogy, right? Sorry, my lower self was flashing back to my 20s and the idea of beer goggles. But I think it's the same idea, right? We put on and we're looking through a distorted lens caused by something. And in this case, right, shame, guilt, hopelessness, sadness, fear, lust, anger, pride, these things that are just so much a part of being human. But understanding that that's the lens you're looking through is the first step to actually changing it, right? So that acknowledgement and the understanding.
Yeah, a lot of times we'll
First
say,
step.
I'm anxious. Well, you are not anxious. You may have on your anxiousness glasses, and you may be seeing the world through the lens of fear, but it's not who you are. It's an emotion that you're experiencing, and it's universal. This is what is so cool, especially for entrepreneurs, is that you can figure it out.
Yeah.
And that when you have anxiousness, when that's taken you over and that's how you see the world, you respond in the same way as I respond. And it's the same way all humans respond. We all respond in the same way to that feeling of fear and anxiety. And if that's true, and it is, because I've helped so many people at this point, then there's also a very clear way to not be that way, and how to get out of that and take those glasses off and see the world correctly again. And it's super fun. It's super fun to learn that this is just a skill that maybe no one's ever taught me before, but it's a skill set nonetheless. It probably is the most important skill set you could possibly learn. Because if we want success, yes, we can have success by grinding through negative emotions. I know plenty of people that have built up big businesses while being miserable. But is being miserable while your marriage is falling apart, your employees hate you, and your kids don't know you, but you have a lot of money, is that really success? to me, that's failure. That's a life failure. If you're miserable while you're wealthy, you have failed. If you are wealthy, but you're not happy, you're doing it all wrong.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, thinking about the fact that understanding and acknowledging and knowing what those 8 primary bad moods are, what are those? What are the most common internal barriers that prevent leaders from achieving actual, authentic
Yeah,
happiness?
it's believing our thoughts. That's the biggest barrier.
Isn't that so simple to say? Right. It's okay. No, duh. But oh my gosh, to overcome that is huge.
It's a lifetime of work. It's a
Yeah.
lifetime of work because our thoughts are very compelling.
Mhm.
And so and it's really easy to explain. It's harder to put into practice, but it's a practice, right? This is a practice. The easy way to explain it is that just think back on something that in the moment seemed really awful, and then years later you look back at that same thing that looked like it was going to be so traumatic or so bad or like it was the end of the world at the time, and you're like, oh my gosh, that's exactly what needed to happen, because that then sprung me into this thing that now is like, I would never have this thing if I didn't have to go through that hardship.
Yeah.
Well, if we knew that the hardship we were going to go through, maybe it's business failure or maybe it's loss of something that we really cared about, was then going to open up all this opportunity for us, why did we have to hate it going through it? We hated it because our thoughts were saying, this is bad, this shouldn't be happening, that person's a jerk, they shouldn't have stole from me, they shouldn't have done this, blah, 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 blah. And we're just like, all these thoughts are coming in. They're not
Mhm.
even true because this thing is actually a gift for us. We're being given this huge gift and we're just hating and rejecting the gift at the same time. But if we know, and this is a truth that I teach, absolutely everything is grace. Every single thing is happening for your ultimate benefit. And if we can't see it in this moment, I can promise you, given a long enough timeline, we will be able to look back and see how this too was happening for our benefit. Every single thing that happens to you is for your growth, your benefit, ultimately the growth and evolution of your soul, which is why we're here. So while things happen and our thoughts say, this shouldn't be happening and I hate it and I don't want it to happen, I'm going to pretend it's not happening and I'm going to curse it the whole way. That thought that we're believing is making us miserable. And we don't have to follow it and we don't have to believe it. And in fact, we can counter it and we could say, there's a movie that Hal Elrod made. He made Miracle Morning movie. And he demonstrates this so perfectly. Hal is in the movie, you're watching his real life. He's in the hospital and the doctor gives him a diagnosis of terminal cancer. And that same day, of course, he's crying. The doctor says your chance of recovery from this is 10% or less. Like, this is a very aggressive, rare form of cancer. He's crying with his wife. And then later that day, he looks at his wife and he says, this is going to be the second best thing that has ever happened to me. Now, does it take a very powerful person to fear, anxiety, I'm going to die, this shouldn't be happening, I've got a family, I've got children, I've got a wife, I have things to do, I'm changing the world, why is this happening, why does God hate me, like all these different thoughts come in? Does it take a lot of power to then say a new thought, this challenge is actually going to be one of the best things that's ever happened in my life? And then that he just decided, he said, this is going to be one of the best things that's ever happened, because the person I'm going to have to become to overcome this challenge is going to make me a greater person than I ever could have been otherwise. Now, if you watch the movie, he overcomes it, but you watch him going through chemo and you watch him taking all the pills and you watch him like struggling through a very, very hard time, like tears, crying, getting skinny, all the things you would think about of recovering from cancer. Hal is on video and you're watching it. And then you watch that he beats the odds and that this thing actually turns him into a person he couldn't have been otherwise, more compassionate, more caring, more loving, more grateful to be alive, more on purpose with every single moment, that he actually, the cancer diagnosis that looked like the worst thing ended up being one of the best things that ever happened. This is how it can be. but we have to change the stories we tell ourselves. Our stories make us miserable.
They do. And we all have that little voice, right? And I guess we have two voices, right? We have our higher self and we have our lower self. And for some reason, the one that has all of the negativity that plays into those eight bad moods sometimes is almost, well, I guess for many people is often the loudest and the most persuasive. And learning how to tap into that other side to find how to debunk all of that, right? To take away the is this real, and be able to ask the question that this is not the worst thing that's ever happened to me. I can solve for a problem. How do we make that shift so that we are actually starting to make the choices? What are those techniques to help us find and stay in the good
You
mood?
have said it so well, Lisa. We do have these two voices. We have the ego voice and we have the higher self voice. And when we're young, we are very infatuated with the ego, extremely. Now I have young children, and we're very self-centered. As a child, we're very self-centered, and we believe everything is about us, and we can't really see the bigger picture. And in our 20s, we become pretty arrogant and cocky. We know that parents say, "Oh, I become stupid when you become a teenager," and it's only when you get into your late 20s or 30s you realize that
Yeah.
I'm pretty smart again. That I, but everyone, every single person actually isn't as smart as you when you're 20 because you're the smartest one. Well, that's ego talking, right? So that voice is really, really, really loud in our younger life. And there's this other voice. They call it the still small voice, the quiet voice. You know, if you're a Christian, you may call that the Holy Spirit that's guiding you. And we have to get quiet to hear that voice. Well, how do we get better at hearing it? We practice hearing it. And I started a practice from actually Hal Elrod's book, Miracle Morning, where I woke up before my family, before my kids, and every morning I would sit with a journal and a pen and a cup of coffee, and I would just think. And in your brain, when you first wake up, is not in the high waves of thinking. It's more in beta or alpha waves, which is more like a meditative state. When you first wake is a
Mhm.
really great time, and just before you go to sleep is a really great time to access that voice. Meditation's another practice we can use to access that voice. But I started to just become so, I'm like, I can't do my life without this morning time where it's just me receiving messages.
Yeah.
Now, where are the messages coming from? Maybe they're coming from subconscious. I don't think so. I think that I'm actually downloading messages from collective consciousness, God, the universe, whatever we want to say. And that as I get a message, I
Yeah.
just write it down on a pad of paper and then I follow it. And every time I follow it, I get confirmation that was the right thing to do, because as I do the thing that I received that morning in quiet and don't listen to the chatter of this sucks and I hate it and blah, 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 all the negativity, but I follow my life gets blessed and I'm like, oh, that worked out. That worked out. Eventually you're like, oh my gosh, every time I listen to this still small voice, my life is beautiful and crazy synchronicities start happening. And like, I'm on a Zoom with Lisa talking about how to be happier, and you're in a different part of the country than I am. And it's like, and we're inspiring people. Like, how did this happen? Well, it happened because I'm listening to this still small voice. And so it becomes louder as we listen and follow.
And so it becomes louder as we listen and follow. I talk often about the cacophony of discord in my head because there's multiple voices. Each of the bad moods has their own voice in my head, and they can
Yes.
sing and scream
Yes.
and it's obnoxious. But getting to that, the one still voice to allow the other side of the equation to play out is probably one of the hardest things that I can possibly try to strive to do. And you talk through meditation and other things, right? These are those practices that we as individuals can go through. How do we start to translate that into being leaders of business and bringing this into corporate culture?
I became good friends with Marianne Williamson, who wrote the book A Return to Love. And I just spent this past weekend with her, and we were having lunch, And she had mentioned something in a seminar, and she said before she walks into every meeting, she sends a quiet prayer, a blessing to each person that's going to be in that meeting. And I sat and I'm like, do you really do that? Or is that just what you say to people? And she said, I will. She said, she said, I prayed for you before we had lunch. How do we bring this into corporate culture? Well, before every Zoom, and Lisa, I prayed for you before I got on the Zoom. You just send a blessing to the person before you enter the room or you enter the Zoom. And now, and prayer is a gateway where we communicate with that still small voice. And it doesn't matter what religion you have or if you even have one. We can pray to the universe. We can pray to the stars and the moon. It doesn't matter. It works. It doesn't matter who you're praying to. You're just praying to something bigger than you that is guiding everything. And so before every meeting, you just say a quiet prayer. I wish the people in this room well. I wish them health. I wish them happiness. Whatever worries are on their mind, I wish that they have ease. And we walk in. That took 10 minutes or 10 seconds, I mean. So 10 seconds before I enter this room, I'm blessing the room. Now I'm asking that still small voice in me to communicate to the love and the connection in them. If my ego head was going crazy, I've calmed it down with this. A deep breath, a little prayer before every meeting. And now we're starting to act from love and connection, and that meeting will come at a higher vibration and better results will come from it. So just to give, skeptics out there some concrete information, we were named the #1 company to work for out of 470,000 companies in the state of South Carolina. You know how cool it is to be the #1 place everyone wants to work? It's not because of anything other than my consciousness of wanting there to be peace and harmony in everyone's life there. And then that's because everything follows the leader. That's spilling down into my management team. That's spilling down into the people that they lead. That's spilling down into the clients that they lead. And now because we're sending out, instead of negativity, which everything's magnetic, if I send out anger and hate, just because our brains are like that, I can't stop my brain from wanting to be angry and hate. But if I attach onto it, I get back anger and hate. But if I don't listen to that voice and I'm like, okay, I hear you being angry that this person didn't do things right, but I'm going to send them a blessing anyway, and I'm going to think the best in them. And I get in that meeting, and now I'm correcting them from a place of love and compassion and understanding. And I'm like, hey, this didn't go exactly the way that we wanted it to go. What's going on? And they're like, man, my mom's sick. I'm so sorry. I can't connect. I can't concentrate on work right now. And you're like, whoa, I was about to blow up on this person who's dealing with one of the hardest things you could deal with. But now instead, I gave them grace and understanding. The next time that when they get their stuff together, they want to work 100 times harder for you because you actually care about who they are as a person and you don't see them as a number that makes you money.
And that is the huge difference. And that is the paradigm shift, right? When we get to the place where we're honoring people in our space. And for those of you who are listening and might get hung up on the idea of the word prayer, I am a happy little agnostic. And sometimes that's a weird one for me, but right, we're sending positive vibes. It's a real simple, right? Positive attitude, a wish, a hope, and who doesn't want and wish and hope the best for everybody that they interact with every day? That's ultimately the
and
goal.
agnostic is fine. And there's nothing wrong with that. It is proven though, that our
Absolutely.
thoughts are electric impulses.
Absolutely.
So from a science perspective, everything is made of vibrating energy because E equals MC squared. So mass equals energy. And our thoughts emit energy. And what's crazy is that the energy of our thoughts actually create like real reality. We are creative with our thoughts. We don't have to know how it works. We don't have to call it God. We don't have to call it anything. We just have to say, I don't know how this works. I don't know how the cut on my arm heals. I don't know how a seed turns into a giant oak tree. We accept that that's okay. Why don't we also accept that when we have a thought, things get created from it? And if we have a negative thought, negative things show up in our life. If we have a positive thought, positive things show up in our life. So it doesn't have to be prayer. It can just be, I know my thoughts will change the energy in this room and will change the results.
Absolutely. And so, Matt, if people are listening, and I know that they are, and they're interested and their curiosity has been piqued, what is the best way for them to find out more about you and about the Good Mood Revolution?
I love your podcast. And I am a huge advocate that whatever we put into our minds is what comes out of our mouth. And so I highly recommend everyone continue to listen to you. And if you want to add another podcast to your repertoire, the best place to connect with me is through the Good Mood Revolution podcast on the same platforms. And it's just once a week. And every week I'm just talking about a new topic about how we can be more loving and more positive in our lives.
And what a fabulous way to spend a little bit of time to connect with the positive energy, to connect with the universe, and to put more good out there. Matt, I have enjoyed our conversation today. We've talked through the fact that our world has always been in a state of turmoil. And, Wayne Dyer said it best, be the change. And that is what you're trying to do with your movement and the Good Mood Revolution, so that we can figure out how to conquer our bad moods and find, when we're losing ourselves from our happiness, how it is we can stop believing the negative thoughts and connect to the positive, so that we really have the ability to quiet our ego and listen to our still small voice and find and create the happiness around us for ourselves and the people that we touch. Audience members, you know my rules. Don't get left behind. Join me next time.
That's it for today's episode of Disrupt and Innovate. Head over to iTunes and subscribe to the show.